Niels, good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. Welcome to the ABM Voice Podcast. So excited to have this conversation. I've been talking about this for quite
Likewise.
some time, right? How's it going? How are things?
Yeah, good. It's been busy a few weeks,
Hmm.
really ramping up our own content strategy as well as working on thought leadership content for our clients.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing to complain.
Good, nice. Could we start with a quick introduction about yourself, the work that you do in your organization, and then your background, maybe?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Although I run a content agency, I have absolutely no background in marketing when it comes to formal education.
Hmm.
So I have a bachelor in business administration and then did innovation management as a master's. But yeah, after working a few years in corporate back here in the Netherlands, I realized that corporate life
Hmm.
wasn't for me. So decided to pivot and start out as a freelancer. Educated myself in a few years in the wonderful world of marketing. Got really excited about it. Got a lot of wonderful clients that really wanted to work on content strategy and content creation.
Hmm.
And when I had more work than I could handle myself,
Hmm.
I decided to start the agency that Leadwave is right now. So as Leadwave, we are focusing on producing thought leadership content that builds real authority and trust. And we do this mostly for sales-led companies, so mostly tech companies
Hmm.
and also consulting firms.
Hmm.
And what we really specialize in is involving their subject matter experts to create unique content that is actually helpful and relevant. I think we will be talking about that a lot on
Absolutely.
how to differentiate yourself through your content. So have a few ideas on that. Yeah, but that's my background.
Sure. So, what got you interested in marketing? Are there any specific incidents or specific ideas that just striked and then you thought, I think I should try my hand in marketing?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think what captured me or what got my attention was for a while I was active on LinkedIn
Hmm.
and I saw some brands really focusing on storytelling through their own LinkedIn posts
Hmm.
rather than the most generic stuff that's being churned out right now on LinkedIn company pages. And I was like, hey, I think this is where the world is going
Hmm.
through creating relevant stories for audiences that really connect the company's products or services with their target audience, but doing it in a way that feels non-salesy.
Hmm.
And in my corporate job, I had like the cold sales approach
Hmm.
where it was just like blasting generic pitches, etc. That didn't feel like me.
Hmm.
So being exposed on LinkedIn to these kind of inbound marketing strategies, I thought like, hey, this is interesting.
Hmm.
This feels more like me. This feels more relevant
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
where the world is going. Yeah, so that's what got my attention and got hooked. To be honest.
Awesome. Where are your clients primarily based? Do you work with clients in Europe specifically or around the world or where?
Yeah, so I think it's 50-50 between United States and United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Dutch. I live in Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of my team is English, so I'm also the only Dutchman
Oh,
within my own agency. So that's also quite funny, especially when my British colleagues are talking slang, etc. um, but yeah, we only have one Dutch client for which we also produce English content. So it's English content
right.
only produced by native English
Hmm.
people.
Hmm. I wanted to dig deep on your framework, and I think that's where we sort of spend a lot of time. But like in terms of content production between the two sets of customers, between the US and Europe, all right? So, are there any subtle differences or cultural, for example? And if so, how do you try and incorporate it?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't think. I don't think per se that there's a huge difference between the US market and the UK market, in a sense that it is more about particular industries and verticals.
Hmm, hmm,
There, that's where the real differences are. So we have a tech company client from the US that is serving verticals in the UK,
hmm.
other parts in Europe, as well as the US, and you see big differences in approaches in those different industries and verticals. So I think it's more on that level where you see massive differences in tone of voice,
Right,
or in localization efforts,
right,
but not on a country per country level,
right.
per se.
So what I was getting to is, like, let's say the same message, right? So let's say a global company, and if you have to write for the UK audience versus the US audience, do you think you will make some subtle changes, or the same content sort of works in both the audiences?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really depends on. For me, great content always starts with a deep understanding of your customer,
Hmm,
right? And customers in the UK are most likely to be different than customers in the US.
hmm.
So there, it will be too generic for me to say like, hey, there will always be a difference. It
Sure.
really depends on the solution that you're offering or the service that you're offering.
Right.
Um, but I think most of the time, what you will see when doing deep customer research
Hmm.
is that um, a specific vertical in the UK will have way different pain points than the same vertical in the US, because of maybe different market regulations, different ecosystems. So for me, if marketers really focus on that deep understanding of their customers, that's where they will get the insights to really be able to talk um, differently to those different markets.
Hmm. Understood. Let's just dig deep into this. And I think you proposed this framework called content market fit. I think the very first time I sort of
Yeah,
got introduced, I was very excited, right? So we've always read, maybe practice something called product market fit, right? So you're talking about something called content market fit, right? Which is something I don't think anybody else is talking. So can you help us understand what you mean by content market fit, and how do you approach, so the take the time that you require to really help us understand how we should approach content in terms of how we produce, how do we distribute, and all of that.
yeah, absolutely. I think everyone has heard of product market fit, right? It's the famous concept within the startup marketing world.
Hmm.
And I was thinking about this, and I was actually reading about the product market fit, and I was also reflecting on the client work that we have done, and I actually came to the realization that for content,
Hmm.
it's the same, right? If your content marketing campaign doesn't have content market fit, it will sink without a trace. And what you see is that with the surge in AI tools and AI driven content,
Mm-hmm.
right now it has never been easier to create content with a click of the button,
Right.
right? So as a result, we're seeing more and more generic, bland content
Mm-hmm.
um, that hit the web as companies shoot for production maximization over actual human insight. And for me, and this is also why clients come to us, with so much artificially inflated competition, you cannot rely on the old way of doing things, right? Desk research alone won't cut it anymore because ChatGPT can do it for you. So you need to dive deeper, and that's where I came up with the concept for content market fit.
Hmm.
So it's Leadwave's framework for creating relevant and highly effective content
Hmm.
for our clients. And so here's how it works. It has three components, and by making sure that you hit these three areas, you will find the content sweet spot
Mm-hmm.
that produces content that really engages, um, drives curiosity, but also elicits action from your reader.
Right.
So the first component is you need to have a unique point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is with the trend of AI driven content. Um, some marketers totally forget that content should have a unique point of view, because otherwise you are just saying the same as everyone else. So most business to business audience include like super savvy people who really know what they're talking about. So in order to persuade them and really build authority with them, you need to have something to say that delivers actual insights and value. If you're talking, and so if you're a company that focuses on doing business with CIOs or CTOs,
Mm-hmm.
these are the people that don't want to hear about your generic tips for digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's but that's what's happening, right? Your audience wants to hear from industry experts,
Mm-hmm.
as not some generic freelancer or some AI tool.
Right.
So having a unique point of view is the most for me the most important uh, one element of the content market fit.
Right.
The second one is focusing on your customer's urgent pain point. You need to light a fire under your readers. If you're only focusing on pain points that are low on their to-do list, they won't be as inclined to read and take action. So you really want to make sure that you hit hard on the right pain points that are important enough for them
Right.
to take action on and to be searching a solution for.
Mm.
And um, important, I think it's important that that in-depth customer research is really needed in this, to find out what keeps your customers and readers awake at night, so that you can really revolve your content around that information.
Mm-hmm.
So your customer's urgent pain point is the second one.
Right.
When we look at the third one, is your, hey, you need to tie it back to your product or service.
Mm.
That might seem obvious, but if you cannot tie your content to your product or service in some way, you won't be able to convert your readers, because ultimately you're talking what you're talking about isn't what you sell. So you also need to tie your content back to what you do. So conclusion for me, when you have those three elements in your content, you do have content market fit, and then hey, you can swim against the tide and really stand out from the crowd. But I see that most companies don't have content market fit, and hence they are, simply adding to a rising sea of
Mm.
generic content.
Mm. Interesting. So where does competition, for example, comes into this three dimension that you just talked about? Do you sort of incorporate, or is it part of the research, or how do you incorporate that particular insight?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. To be honest, I um, we don't really focus on competitors as much
Okay.
as other agencies may do.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there is a place and time for competitor research, just to see like what they are up to. Are there any content gaps that you can fill, that your competitors are not exploiting, for instance?
Right.
But ultimately, this is my personal point of view, is that as a company, you want to focus on your own strengths,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to be misled, or you don't want to be um, unfocused for what
Right.
your competitors are doing.
Makes sense.
S yeah,
Sure. And how do you put this framework to use? So do you maintain some sort of a checklist? And where does this really apply, right? So let's say website, social, there are multiple channels on which we produce content, right? So how do you sort of implement something like this? And
yeah,
somebody who maybe they wanted to self-implement, right? So what would you advise to those set of people?
yeah, absolutely. I think when creating a piece, whether it's for social or whether it's for your website, it always starts with a content brief,
Right.
right? So these three elements should be embedded in your content brief for it to be consistently put out in your content, and for it to be consistently present in
Hmm.
your content. Because if you don't do that consistently, you yeah, you essentially lose sight of it, and then chances are that over time you are just doing what you were previously doing,
Sure.
and not having that content market fit, right? So I think it starts with a content brief and good coordination.
Hmm.
I mean, it's not a concept that you just do once and then set and forget. It's really something that needs to be part of the marketing identity for a company. So either you have an agency that is really focused on implementing this for a client, or you have like a head of marketing or a content marketing manager that is really focused on um, yeah, on using this framework for all of the content pieces that you focus
Right.
on. And after practice, what you will also see, yeah. So, for instance, you asked, how do I apply this in from a day to day perspective?
Correct.
Um, and one of the elements is understanding your customers' urgent pain points, right? That starts with a deep understanding of your customers. So go talk to them, schedule a 20-minute call with your best customers, listen to recordings of sales calls, join calls with your customer success managers, for instance, and really take note of the questions that your prospects are asking, the questions that your customers are asking, the language that they're using, the way that they are describing their challenges or pain points, and really documenting that well, so that you have this list of endless ideas and information ripe for the picking for the content that you want to create.
Hmm.
I think your had a second element in the content market fit, which is your tying it back to your product or service
Right.
that requires like a good understanding of what you offer.
Hmm.
I think that is something that every marketer should have, so that should come more natural. Um, when it comes to your unique point of view, that's an interesting one. I think a lot of companies have trouble understanding and identifying what their best story is.
Right.
And I think the reason for that is because they realize, or they don't realize, that their internal subject matter experts should be the one guiding those discussions and
Hmm.
conversations.
Hmm.
So, what we really try to do when working with the client, we go in and we say, like, hey, these are the topics that we want to talk about. These are the angles that we want to talk about, and let's go find the best subject matter experts within your company that have something interesting to say about that. So then we are going to interview them, and then based on these interviews, we are going to use their insights, their ideas, their quotes to craft that narrative around a certain topic. And I think when you talk to the subject matter experts, is you will soon enough find a unique point of view around a certain topic, because essentially when you talk with these experts, they talk from experience, from years of experience. That's something that ChatGPT cannot do. They just the AI tools, they just look at summaries, or they are just churning out summaries, right? So really leaning and focusing on that expertise from those subject matter experts. That's where the real goal is in terms of creating unique, relevant content for your audience.
Interesting. Very interesting. And this framework, according to you, is this a marketing framework, or it also overlaps with sales content, for example? Uh, how do you view it, or how have you designed this?
Being a marketing company, it is originally focused um, on as a marketing concept,
Mm.
but it's definitely applicable for product and sales as well,
Mm.
especially for sales, right?
Right.
When you look at the typical messages that everyone gets, like, hey, are you looking for new clients? We do lead gen, and can we chat next Tuesday? I mean, those kind of generic messages are not going to cut it anymore.
Mm.
So also for sales, it's important to have a kind of certain kind of uniqueness to really stand out. Your message obviously needs to tie back to your product or service, and it also really needs to tie back on your customers' urgent pain points,
Yeah.
right? So having that unique point of view, tie it back to your product or service, and really hammering hard on your customer's urgent pain point or your prospect's urgent pain point in this case
Right.
falls in the same framework.
Yeah. Sure. I'm just wondering. I think you talked about research, right? So maybe is there a way you can explain that, taking an example of a recent project that you've executed? So what are the sources, right? So typically one should go after. I think usually it's LinkedIn, right? So go to the person's profile, just see, scan through what they've done, talk, and things like that, right? In some industries, right, so where the executives, for example, they're not digitally present, right? So how do you basically address those industries which are not, like, digital adoption is not there, right? Practically, let's say in pharmaceuticals and those sort of like old school industries, right? So they're not there and they're not talking. Maybe they're attending conferences and things like that, but you don't have access, right? So for that kind of an audience, how do you approach this or implement this framework? Research in
Uh,
general.
from a from a marketing perspective, you would say.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there are so many sources for information uh, that you have, even though when you have a little harder to reach audience. Um, I think a lot of companies don't realize that they are sitting on a gold mine of data that will help them understand their customer better,
Mm,
even when the audience seems hard to reach
yeah,
or hard to understand. So for me, I'm about keeping things simple as possible
right.
and really looking what you already have. So go back to sales calls recordings. Um, you have those, right? Prospects that are asking questions, that bring up their pain points. Every marketer should listen to those recordings to really understand the language that their prospects are using, the questions that they are asking, how they are describing their challenges or pain points.
Yeah.
Um, but also more or less straightforward things such as support tickets,
Mm,
right?
mm,
What support tickets does your service desk get? What type of problems do they face? Your customer success department, what kind of questions are they answering each and every day?
yeah.
Ask your customer success manager if you can join one of the conversations with your customer.
Mm,
That's pure content gold,
right.
and it really helps to understand in a detailed way who you are actually talking to. Field events, go to field events, conferences, um, chat with the attendees, organize a roundtable, go to online communities, right? Whether it's Reddit or LinkedIn, um, mine the discussions there.
Mm,
Listen to industry podcasts where these hard to reach CEOs are being featured
sure.
or where they are guests, and listen to what they are talking about. There are so many untapped resources for this kind of information, but yeah, for some reason companies seem to don't seem to really see them.
I guess that's one of the reasons that why you exist, right? Agencies like yours exist.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
this.
But it's not rocket
It
science,
isn't.
right?
Yeah,
And
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 I agree. Yeah.
and that's also what surprises me often is that I mean it's not rocket science, but I think as marketers we really tend to overcomplicate
Hmm.
things just because there's a new technology
Yeah.
around the corner, or hey, we are chasing the next shiny object.
Hmm.
But I think when you keep things really simple, you understand that you already have a lot of information and data that you can use to create relevant and effective content.
Right. Okay, you mentioned ChatGPT at least 4 times, if my counting was right. Right. As a content agency, right? Do you see them as friends or enemies?
um, I definitely see them as friends, right? Um, I think when ChatGPT first came around at massive scale, I think it was January or February this year. It took a few days for me to really figure out, like, hey, what is going on, and should I be worried?
Hmm.
But after a few weeks of monitoring the discussions online and trying it out myself, I've really seen, yeah, I've really become to see it as a friend and as a tool that is useful. Um, I think there's no reason to be afraid, right? I think for Leadwave as a company, ChatGPT is currently the reason why we are thriving.
Hmm.
And the reason why I say that is because AI tools really produce mediocre content,
Right.
right? So it's impossible to create new ideas only using an AI tool because ChatGPT and Google Bard, they're really, literally summarizing existing ideas from the internet.
Yeah.
So companies that realize that good content is not the generic content that everyone is churning out from these AI tools.
Hmm.
Understand that it's important to source unique insights and ideas from their subject matter experts,
Hmm.
because those subject matter experts have what AI doesn't have, which is unique experience, unique insights, unique ideas. And that's what they need help with.
Hmm.
And that's something that AI yeah, cannot do yet.
Right. Yeah. So that's my next question. What are the chances, let's say, in chat, sorry, in GPT 4 and 4.5 or 5 that they take content market fit framework as an input, right? And does all of what you say that a human has to do. When do you think some sort of a magic like that happen, if at all? Is there a possibility that this can happen? So all we're talking about here is doing research, and we just spoke about content, the insights being available in different sources, right? So the way the models are built today, they don't have access. But I think in the further versions, right? So if we just provide access to it, I think at some point of time it's going to do what we're talking here. Do you think one day, not too far from now, that's likely to happen? Speculating,
Look,
but I just wanted to.
the technology and the pace of development of this technology is bizarre.
Hmm.
Um, it's astonishing to see what these AI tools can do, right?
Right.
Um, I'm definitely no AI expert, but
Sure.
I'm sure that in a few years, these AI tools will be able to do much and much more than they are now. And the writing quality may increase, the storytelling features may increase. But I think what a lot of marketers don't realize is that for AI to be really effective, they need to be commanded,
Hmm.
right? They need to be a co-pilot
Yeah.
for it to be super effective. So still, I think a few years down the line, I still don't, I still wouldn't see AI as a threat because you still need the context and the strategizing
Hmm.
that AI simply cannot do. That's a marketer's job. That's a strategist's job.
Sure.
And I think in that regard, it will be a huge opportunity for marketing because AI will allow them to um, save time on certain aspects of content creation. So it will act as a huge time saver,
Hmm.
which allows them to create better content at scale
Right.
because they can now spend more time on
Strategizing. Yeah.
strategizing and exactly. So that's where I see it heading.
Okay. That's good. So let's just switch gears. One or two, just quickly touch upon your approach in terms of how you're building your own community audience, right, on LinkedIn specifically, and that's where we got connected, right? I think so. You, whether it comes to consistency or the quality of content that you produce, right? It's a pretty like what you've been speaking about, right? So it's just like produced with a lot of value, right? So there is a lot of takeaways and things like that. So what's your approach? What's your thought process in terms of producing that, and how should? What's your general advice for somebody who wants to build such an audience?
Yeah, yeah, appreciate you mentioning that, and it's something that I've been working hard on in terms of my own LinkedIn posts and really being consistent with that. For me, it's all about having a clear plan and being value led. So, how can you create value for your audience um, without being salesy?
Hmm.
So, it's my goal to really build trust at scale, and I focus on the 95% of people that are not in the market for my services right now.
Hmm.
Because over time, this approach gives me far better results
Right.
than producing like salesy content that focuses on the 5%
Hmm.
of the people that are in market. Right? People love to buy, but they don't like being
Pretty
sold to.
so. Yeah.
So um, for me, it all starts with having a clear plan. So anyone who is reluctant to start on LinkedIn, um, create like a clear plan that starts with identifying the urgent pain points of your audience, right? So I work with marketing managers and content managers at tech companies and consulting firms. And over the past few years, I had a lot of conversations with them to identify their urgent pain points. I've listed them all down in one master document. And it essentially comes down to three key things. They're not getting enough results from their content. They're lacking ideas to create high impact content that really moves the needle for them, or they're doing random acts of content without a real content strategy behind it.
Yeah.
So then, once you have that information, the next step for me is to create content that really revolves around these urgent pain points and provide unique, non-obvious insight that will help my audience to
Hmm.
create better content.
That
So yeah, that's my approach in a nutshell.
makes sense. So once you produce a content, a piece of content, right? So what's your idea of or advice or practice around refreshing as well as repurposing?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of companies don't realize that they probably already have a lot of existing content that
Right.
can be repurposed in a good way, especially in an economic landscape where budgets are tight, resources are tight. Um, Companies would do good to have a critical look at their existing content and really analyze like, hey, what is the content that we could reuse and repurpose for different channels.
Yeah.
um, so I think personally, I always advise clients focus on one channel first when it comes to repurposing or
Hmm.
distributing.
Hmm.
Most of the time this is LinkedIn. um, I think a lot of companies make the mistake of doing too much at once.
Right.
And once they have focused on all these different channels with all different types of content, then they go back and say, well, these channels didn't perform well. Um, so that's always why I say focus on one channel first, dominate that channel, and then once you're dominating that channel, then add a second one so that you really can be focused about your efforts.
Right.
Um, when you look at your existing content, analyze which articles, podcasts, or webinars have been performing well, and start repurposing them.
Hmm.
For instance, you can easily write 20 LinkedIn posts from one article that has, let's say, 2,000 words
Hmm.
with various angles, various images. So, yeah, if you ask me, companies need to be smarter about their repurposing strategies because right now, a lot of marketing teams are not getting the most out of the content um, that they've already invested in.
Right. The content market fit framework, how do you think it can be adopted for an ABM sort of marketing, right? So while I think what you talked about is general best practices, but are there any nuances, subtleties that needs to be changed to apply for an ABM kind of a scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with any ABM campaign, you are trying to segment your target list,
Yep.
right? Because you want to have a more focused approach.
Right.
Um, I think what can be done better in those instances is that before you are segmenting your target list, always make sure that the pain points are the same for the segment that you're targeting,
Hmm.
because otherwise you run the risk of being irrelevant.
Right.
You want to hit your target list hard on the pain points because that's where the real pain is. Um, but if you're hitting wrong, if you're hitting the wrong buttons,
Hmm.
it's a waste of time and money. So I would definitely advise companies to segment their target list based on similar pain points.
Hmm.
And for me personally, that would be the main criteria for segmentation there.
Very interesting. I think it's a good way of thinking how to segment, right, and create these tiers. Really good. Um, what about content personalization, right? Again, in the context of ABM, right? So you're trying to be as personal as possible, especially when you're driving one to few, one to many type of ABM, right? Personalization, where does it fit into the overall scheme of your framework?
Again, it really comes down to understanding your customer and your reader. So, what is the urgent pain point that you are having a solution for? And whether you are applying a one to many or a one to one focus for your ABM campaign, you do want to make sure that you're hitting the right pain points because ultimately you want to sell a painkiller rather than a vitamin.
Hmm,
And um, yeah, so for me, it comes down to a deep understanding of your customers. And once you have that, it doesn't matter whether you're doing a one to one or a one to many campaign,
sure.
because then you have already segmented your list
Hmm,
for it in order to be effective.
sure. That's good. I think excellent set of points, right? I've learned quite a bit of things around, right? How do you now start thinking the content marketing piece with this methodology, right? And how do you approach it, like very tactically in terms of these three dimensions that I talked about? Thank you so much for sharing this. Appreciate you coming and taking time and talking to me. Do you have any
Thanks
final?
for having me.
Absolutely. Do you have any final thoughts? How should people reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. People can find me on LinkedIn. I post every weekday there. Love to network with people, so definitely feel free to send me a DM or engage with me in the comments. Um, I think the biggest takeaway for me, looking at the marketing landscape as it is, I think a lot of companies can benefit from involving their internal subject matter experts in the content creation process. Start interviewing them or have them write content for you, because it's a critical factor in differentiation,
Hmm,
right? Because it's the only way to really stand out from the pack that is churning out AI content faster than the speed of light.
right,
Um, Ultimately, once people really put themselves in the shoes of their audience, they will come to the realization that your reader wants to hear from industry
right.
experts, and your internal experts are your source for unique quotes, ideas, experience that your competitors can only dream of.
Mm.
And that's when you start building real relevance and authority.
I think bottom line, focus on building value-based content. Something that's going to be useful, solving some problems, pain points, acting as a vitamin instead of just trying to just like fill your websites and blog CMS with a lot of content, which is
Absolutely.
going to be like trashy. Excellent. Thank you, Niels. Thanks a lot. This has been like pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Cheers.